Your eyes look totally normal.
Yay! I just went and saw the surgeon this morning and she was like, I think we can not do a procedure today. I'm like, that would be good.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you again for being flexible. I really appreciate it. Of
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thanks for making the time.
course.
So we'll just talk for about 10 minutes or so. It's not live. We'll just take the best parts.
Okay.
And I think run this next week or the week after that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and congrats on you're like out of the gate. You're a bestseller. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's been a crazy ride. It's super, super exciting.
Yeah. So tell me the sort of path for you to becoming a published writer.
Yeah, so, it's one of those funny overnight success stories where the overnight took about 6.5 years. I started out writing once my daughter was about 1. I had a little bit more time. I'd spent a bunch of time when she was a baby reading and decided I wanted to try writing because I'd always enjoyed writing. And from there, I wrote 8 different manuscripts in those 6.5 years. And some of them I started out with fantasy, then gave up on that because I decided I was terrible at world building. So I did some contemporary social justice manuscripts because I have a law degree and I was a practicing lawyer for a while, so I thought I wanted to do that. And writing about the real world seemed like it might solve my problem of not being able to create worlds. And I had an agent, and over 3 years, we tried to sell 3 different books. We did not sell them. I was on the brink of quitting. I had this one last crazy idea. I told my friends, I thought that they would laugh at me. Haha, Evelyn, you don't write fantasy. And they said to do it. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And if it doesn't work, then I guess I'll go back to being a lawyer or I'll find something else to do. And so it was just kind of an all-in effort. And I think that all those years and all those manuscripts finally kind of got me to the point where I could build a world. And so that was the Crowns Game.
Yeah. But it's, you use history. So first of all, I love Russian history, so I want to ask you about because you clearly have a love for Russian history, but you use history. So I guess it's historical fantasy. You use history, actual history, as like a launching off point. Was it just that Russian history is so sort of dramatic that made you choose that country's history, or what was it that made you choose Russian history?
So I have a degree from Stanford. My bachelor's degree is in Russian literature and history. And it was always 19th century that really drew me in. So literature in particular was Tolstoy and Turgenev. Those are my favorites, especially their depictions of the city versus the country, which kind of comes into play in my book as kind of like an homage to Tolstoy. And it was also, it was a world that I loved, a culture that I loved that I feel like in America we don't know enough about. We hear a lot about the last of the Romanovs with the last Nikolai and Anastasia and Rasputin, but people don't really know about the earlier Romanovs. So I really wanted to explore that and bring that to life.
Yeah, yeah. So our reviewer, you may or may not know, loved your book and said that it wasn't just dramatic, but sort of operatic. And I think it's actually the first time that since I've been the editor here that I've seen over the top used in a really complimentary way. So were you aiming for that, or is it more that it's written for teens? Or tell me about your approach to the tone and style.
Yeah, I wasn't aiming for it in any particular way. It was just when I started writing it, this was the voice and the feel that came out. And I think part of it is just that the 19th century aristocracy, that world in St. Petersburg is already incredibly lush. And it just, I was so flattered by the use of the word operatic, also because one of my characters sings opera for fun, so it worked out really, really nicely. But yeah, it was just like the nature of the story. It told itself and it came out this way.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing the reviewer noted is that it seems like there might be a sequel.
Yes.
So tell me, it's obviously sort of more of a sure bet when your agent can say to a potential editor, we want to make this a trilogy, and she already has the second book plot outline worked out or whatever they're going to say. But that's great. But that means for you, like, you're going to be spending a lot of time with the same characters, right?
Right.
And so how did you get to the point, I guess, where you knew that these were the people that you wanted to spend a lot of time with?
Right. So we pitched the book initially as a standalone with a potential to be a series. And so the way that this book ends right now, it could have just ended that way. At least I think it could have. And I think some people might have been upset because they want to know what happens. But I think it's possible to just say, well, this is what it is, and you imagine whatever else happens. Happily for us, Harper wanted 2 books. And so we signed the deal for a duology. And that seemed like it was something I wanted to do because I felt like there was still more to tell for Nikolai and Vika and Pasha's stories. And there was more of history that I wanted to explain, and not to, give out any spoilers, but this is kind of a big deal this year that this book takes place in. So, the sequel is going to touch upon that historically. And there was still more magic I wanted to layer in, big magic and more St. Petersburg. And I'm just so excited that people are excited, or other people are excited about this world that I've loved for so long, that I definitely want to stay in it for at least a little bit longer, at least this one more book.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me about the success of this book, because as you mentioned, most American teenagers nowadays are not taught about the intricacies of Russian history. If anything, it's the latter-day Romanovs, as you mentioned. So tell me a little bit about the reactions that you've been getting. I mean, have you been hearing from teens who have been enjoying learning about that history, or what has that been like?
Yeah, it's been actually really exciting, because there have been a lot of people who have said that they never knew that St. Petersburg was like this. I think people's reaction a lot of times is they think of Russia as being onion domes and fur hats. And yes, we do have onion domes and fur hats, but also St. Petersburg is just so completely different from Moscow. And I think that our perception of Russia is Moscow very often. And so to introduce them to this world is really interesting to them. And yet it's kind of an easy transition, because they are used to seeing France, around that era, right? They understand France and they understand England at that time through all the Victorian novels that we have. And so that kind of eases them into this Russia and makes it something that they understand. And yet it's a little bit different, because there's still the Russian culture there too. And so I have been getting notes from teenagers saying that they are sharing the book with their history teacher and they want to do something for class about this, to make it a project. And it's really great for me too, because like you said, there is real history in here. And I do take liberties because it's a fantasy. But, at the end of the book, I have an entire author's note that talks about what's real and what's not real. And the thing I'm playing with too, which people don't know about yet, but which I'll talk about in the sequel's author note, is that there are little historical Easter eggs hidden throughout the book, which if you're a real history buff, you'll be able to see, okay, what did she do that wasn't quite, the way history made it, but like it was done intentionally. So, and that plays with some of the magic too.
You mean historical Fabergé Easter eggs, right?
Yes. That is remarkably on point, Clay.
I just got to show off how smart I am. So,
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite character?
Oh my gosh, that's like the most unfair question.
Yeah.
I love all of them for different reasons, and they all have their flaws and their strengths. I think in terms of, I could talk about which one's easiest for me to write, and that was Nikolai, because I think that he has more of me inside of him than the other characters. So it was easier for me to understand where he's coming from and what his motivations are. So it's not that I love him better, it's just that as a writer, he was the easiest child for me to deal with.
Yeah. And is it easy to switch from sort of the so-called good guys to the darker characters in writing these different kinds of people?
It always takes a little while for me to ease from one character to the next. But now, having done it for an entire novel and then the many drafts of the sequel that I've been through, it's getting a little easier to jump heads and just switch around, and whatever. When I'm editing, what I'll do sometimes is I'll just take Vika, for instance, and I'll just go through all of her chapters. And so I'm just kind of in her head, and it's consistent. And then I'll go back to Pasha later, or Aijana, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that seems kind of a smart way to do it. Might there be a trilogy?
As far as I know, it's just a duology, and I am quietly on the side working on a different project, another series. So we'll see, what happens with that. But I would love to stay in Russia, and if not, then there's all sorts of other worlds and new characters that I'm excited to introduce people to. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, it's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Congrats again, and let us know when the next one is out.
Awesome. Should be next year.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Clay.
Okay, have a good day.
Bye, you too.
Okay, bye.